Hi everyone, this is Mehul Kothari. In this complete short presentation, I'm just going to show what is Angular, its various features, its architectural components, and all. So before getting started, if you are confused about your career, or if you are confused in which technology you should work, if you want to work as a front-end developer but you don't know where to get started, then this is the one presentation you should definitely watch. So there are majority two frameworks of JavaScript. One is the Angular and other is the React. So if you will compare both, it is a personal choice which to choose or not. But what I personally suggest, I personally feel is if you are able to learn any of the one framework, you can definitely learn the other framework very easily. Both are having its own feature and disadvantages. I'm not going to compare here. It's just a video on Angular, but on a precise note, I personally feel that if you are able to learn Angular, it will be much easier to learn React for you. Why I'm saying that? Because Angular have its own framework, it has its own libraries, it has its own coding structure, file structure that is completely very niche. So you should definitely look once in Angular and then you should get started with React. So let's get started. So very first question is, what is Angular? So Angular is nothing but it's a JavaScript framework. When I say framework means it is a complete architecture which have its own libraries, own modules, everything. Then second thing is Angular is a single page application. So whatever single page application you build, you will be using Angular or React or Vue. But yeah, why we are using Angular? To make a single page application. So what is single page application? So let me show you one example of single page application. So here you can see this is the Obstruct's official platform. Now whenever I click on anything, the data gets loaded here, but the refresh icon is not getting refreshed. So you are changing anything, but the refresh icon is still the same. So by what I mean from single page application is that everything is loaded on single page. The server you don't request to the server again and again, but you everything load on one page, and then on your conditions, on your routing logic, you render the different components as per your choice. So this is a single page application. Angular comes with own feature like template binding, event binding, property binding, routing, modules, and services, dependency injections. So all are the concepts of Angular. So let's go one by one. So if you are planning to learn Angular, these are the basics of Angular which you should be knowing. Introduction, architecture, installation and configuration, then how to declare variables, and what are the control statements like if, else, then what are the directives, modules, component, pipe, service, HTTP client, and forums. Once you are done with this complete basics, then you can go for third-party integration of Angular, third-party library integration, Google Map API integration, authentication integration, or any live project or any of the project you want to do with by yourself. So yeah, Angular introduction. It is a JavaScript framework for developing a client-side, front-end, mobile, and desktop web application. So what I mean by client side is the application which are going to run in a browser but which are not going to run on server. So the application which are going to run in a browser, it will be using Angular. It is used to develop single page application, as I already mentioned. Then again, Angular bootstraps JavaScript with HTML, so nothing much complicated, but Angular will be using HTML tags with JavaScript. It is used to make a very good UI application. It is used to make a better user experience. Then the Angular code is written in TypeScript. Now what is a TypeScript? So TypeScript is a superscript of JavaScript which ultimately compiles to JavaScript when you run your Angular application. So this is a diagram. You write a code in a TypeScript, you compile it, it will convert to JavaScript, and then HTML will use that raw JavaScript. This is the architecture of Angular. Yeah, before going to the architecture, one more important note, that Angular is supported by Google, and every 6 months you will be having a new version of Angular. But the very first version of Angular was Angular JS, which was completely different from all the versions till now we have. So Angular JS was the very first version, and then Google did some modification and developed the framework, and Google came up with a new version, that is Angular 2. From Angular 2 to Angular 11, that is the current Angular version, all the basics are same, just some updates, some patches, some new libraries are added, but the basics are still the same. There is nothing changed in the basics. So if you want to start with any version of the Angular, you should be knowing these basics, this architecture. So this all are the basics of this Angular. If you are planning to learn, then you should be knowing everything, this all 8 parts in details. So when you talk about Angular architecture, so very first thing will come is modules. So there can be one module, there can be multiple modules in Angular, but yeah, one application will have at least one module, and a module can have another component, directives, services, everything. So modules is something you can say a container of the application, and then you can have multiple components in one modules, and likewise. Then comes component. So what are the components? Component is something you want to render on your screen. So here if I compare what is component, so you can see this complete sidebar will be a one component. Then what you are seeing on my screen, this complete part will be a one component. Now when you click on transaction, the data is getting changed. So this will be coming from some another component. Now when you are clicking on settlement, that some data is coming again. This will be one another component. So this is what we call component in Angular. Then what is a template? So template is nothing but what you write in HTML is something we call as a template. Then metadata. So in a TypeScript file, let me show you one example. So yeah, this is one TypeScript file. Now you can see add ng module declaration. So this is something we can call as a metadata. It will tell what it is. So it is saying that it is a module which can have some components, and which can have some other modules, and which can have some services as well. So this is something we can call as a metadata. So then comes the data binding. So what is data binding? Data binding is nothing but how you bind your data from TypeScript file to HTML, or how you render your dynamic data. That is something we can call as a data binding. Then directives. So what are directives? So directives are nothing but it is something which will give the power to your HTML to bind your data either conditionally, or you want to apply some styles, or you want some default styling on your every HTML tag. For those purposes we'll be using directives. Then we have services. So services is nothing but whenever we want to write any business logic, or whenever we want to call any of our HTTP RESTful API service calls, we will be using services. And the very last one is dependency injection. So dependency injection is nothing but the way we inject our services in our Angular application. It is called a dependency injection. Then next comes the installation of Angular. To install Angular, the very first thing we will be needing is Node.js. So we need to install the So very first thing we will be needing is Node.js. Once you have installed Node.js, you can install Angular CLI. So this is the command you can find on Google, or I will mention in the description as well. So when you will install Node.js and install Angular CLI, you will be able to make a new application with the Angular. So how you can create your new project in Angular. So ng is the command we'll be using for Angular, and new is the keyword, and then project name which you want to give for your Angular application. So you can see ng new project name. Once you are done, then you will be have with some list of files and folders. So when you are done, you will be having this much files and folder automatically given by Angular framework. Node module, sources, editor config, Angular JSON, Karma, package JSON, and all this. In the majority of whatever changes you will be making, it will be in source folder, and all your components will be in app component. And when you will have modules, you will have one app.module.ts. If you have some other module, you will have some app some.module.ts. Likewise, the number of components you will have, the component will have their own files, HTML, CSS, TS files. And yeah, if you will have services, then you will have services files. If you will have routing, you will have routing files. So all of this stuff is covered in it. So this was the all basics on Angular. If you want to go concept by concepts or topic by topics, I will be uploading a separate presentation for that with the detailed understanding. But yeah, this was the basics of Angular. And if you want what you should start with, either you should start with React or Angular. My personal suggestion will be you should start with Angular. Why? Because Angular have a very straightforward folder structure. Any component you will make, that will have its own component file. Any module it will have its own module file. Any services you will have, it will have its own services file. So it will be easier for you to understand if you want to consider, let's say this is a component file. So a component will have HTML file, CSS file and a TS file. In the HTML file you will only be writing HTML. In the CSS file you will be only writing CSS. And in the TS file you will be only writing a business logic, function calls and all that stuff. This is not the case with React. In React you have everything in one place, the logic, the CSS,